Kathryn Bigelow's newest thriller, A House of Dynamite, has caught some flack recently from several viewers who feel the ending is a little more than disappointing. This is nothing new in the history of cinema. There have been good and bad endings to stories since storytelling began. What I hope to do in this video is elucidate just who's responsible for the ending of a movie, and how a good movie can become a great movie with the right ending, and a great movie can become a great disappointment with a bad ending. Someone once said, if you really want to know who's in charge of a movie, go to the set and see who gets asked all the questions. It's the director. Yes, film is a collaborative medium, but in many ways, the screenwriter, the cinematographer, the actors, they're all just advisors to the director, putting their input as to how this shot might work, or how this line might be written, or how these lines might be read. That's the actors, the screenwriters, the cinematographer. They're all working together, but it's the director who has the final say, at least with the best directors. Now, in some cases, if the writer's big enough, like Big, George Bernard Shaw Big, or Harold Pinter, they might have final say over how the screenplay gets filmed. But in most cases, it's the director. Except in classic Hollywood, when it was often the producer or the studio. Take, for instance, this movie, A Streetcar Named Desire. The director, Elia Kazan, and the writer, Tennessee Williams, had already worked together by the time they collaborated on the movie version. The Broadway version was also directed by Kazan, so he had worked with Tennessee Williams on that, and Tennessee Williams had won the Pulitzer Prize for A Streetcar Named Desire. At the time Kazan started to direct it in 1947, he had already won an Oscar for Best Director for Gentleman's Agreement. These were two powerhouses within the theater and film community, and yet, even they combined could not control the ending of A Streetcar Named Desire, the movie. Tennessee Williams himself, born Thomas Lanier Williams, was a gay man in the South in the first part of the 20th century, so he knew a little something about persecution, and in his plays, he explored uncomfortable themes. Things that, well, the movies, still adhering to the production code, really didn't want to go near. The characters in A Streetcar Named Desire are deeply problematic. Blanche Dubois lost her teaching job, although she lies about why. The real reason is because she had a relationship with an underage student. And the reason her husband shot himself in their car was because he was having an affair with another man. Blanche walked in on them and later gay-shamed him, leading to his unfortunate self-demise. This isn't exactly the stuff Hollywood was thrilled about in 1951, but A Streetcar Named Desire was a huge Broadway hit, and again, a Pulitzer Prize-winning play, so they definitely, for prestige sake alone, wanted to bring it to the screen. Nevertheless, they edited out almost every important piece of information that a viewer not familiar with the play would need to understand what was going on, including all of that about Blanche and her husband. That's not really explicitly stated in the film as it is in the play, so a lot of people watching just the movie might not quite understand what happens with Blanche's former husband. But mostly, Williams explored themes of abuse and victimhood. Victimhood either foisted upon someone or taken upon themselves. In the movie, as in the play, Blanche's sister, Stella, is married to Stanley Kowalski, who is physically abusive to Stella. And when he is physically abusive to her in the play, and Blanche whisks Stella away from him, she eventually goes back to him, to the shock of Blanche. The way the play ends is, well, Stanley attacks Blanche while Stella is giving birth to his child at the hospital. He physically has his way with her. Then when Stella returns with their newborn, Blanche is catatonic because of her assault, and Stella still goes back to Stanley, knowing what he did to her sister. Except in the movie version, where it ends with her leaving Stanley. A diametrically opposed ending to what Williams had written, because what Williams wanted to explore was how people will continue to go back to their abuser. But in 1951, the studio said, no way, we're not doing that, and they decided to end the play their way. Other examples of directors not having control over how their movie ends are things like Suspicion, directed by Alfred Hitchcock. Again, the studio did not want lead actor Cary Grant viewed as a killer, a bad guy. And so, even though the script had originally called for him to be revealed as a killer at the end, they walked that back, despite Hitchcock's objections. They had the final say. This was 1941. Hitchcock was big. He had just walked away with Best Picture for Rebecca, but he wasn't big enough to overrule the studio. Later, when Hitchcock became a much more powerful figure in the movie industry, he was able to dictate the ends of his films. One notable case is Vertigo. The movie explores the themes of love and obsession, in which both the Kim Novak character and the Jimmy Stewart character become dangerously obsessed with each other. It's not a love story, it's a story of mutual, crippling obsession. It's about two people who are in a mutually destructive relationship. Because of that, Hitchcock didn't really care about who the killer was or if they got away with anything. But the studio noticed and said, hey, the guy who had his wife killed, he just gets away with it. We don't really like that. We'd like there to be an ending where he gets caught. Gavin Elster, the man who sets up his own wife to be killed and then have Scotty take the fall for it, gets away scot-free. After the inquest, he's never mentioned again. So the studio had Alfred Hitchcock film an ending in which Midge, played by Barbara Bel Geddes, is listening to the radio as Elster is pursued across Europe. Then Scotty comes in, she turns off the radio, and the two of them have a drink. It's a pretty lame ending, and Hitchcock said, I filmed it, but I'm not using it. And he had the power at that point to make that decision. Thankfully. But one of the most momentous changes to a movie ending in all of cinema history would come 16 years later, when a director disagreed with the writer over how the story should go, and created one of the most iconic endings in all of movie history. The closing line of the 1974 movie Chinatown is so iconic that most people know it without ever having seen the movie. In fact, most people can probably repeat that line without knowing anything else about the story. But that line was never intended to exist in the first place. Screenwriter Robert Towne wrote a very different ending for the movie. In his ending, Noah Cross, played by John Huston, was to be killed, and Evelyn Mulwray, played by Faye Dunaway, was to escape alive. Roman Polanski, the director, did not like that ending at all. He argued with Towne over it and said that he felt for the movie to be great, it couldn't have a happy ending. The movie is all about the rich and powerful using their power to gain money for themselves and destroy the lives of people in their wake. To have it suddenly wrapped up with a nice happy ending felt all wrong to Roman Polanski. And so, as the director, he overrode Robert Towne, the writer, and literally wrote the ending himself. And that ending, in which Noah Cross not only lives, but takes away his daughter that he had with his other daughter, Evelyn Mulray, who has now been killed, leads the partner of Jake Gittes to console him by saying, "Forget it, Jake. It's Chinatown." The fact that Roman Polanski saw where that story needed to go is indicative of what a great director can do with a great movie, a great screenplay, or even just a good screenplay. I would argue that Chinatown's a great screenplay regardless, but that closing, that ending that Polanski came up with, it takes it into the greatest movies of all time territory. That ending, again, decided on by the director, makes it. And that's why it's important for people to know that the director has that ability. Which is why it can be infuriating when a movie seems to be going right and then has an ending that just doesn't work. And when that happens, and people say, well, that's how it was written, that's really not an excuse. One of the more famous recent examples, and by recent I mean in the 21st century, is Steven Spielberg's Lincoln. This is a movie that had such a divisive ending that even Samuel Jackson himself made a video decrying it and talking about how Spielberg had gotten it all wrong. And a lot of people were on board with that, including me, who also felt Spielberg completely blew the ending. Spielberg fans were quick to jump to his defense and say, wait, that's how the screenwriter wrote the ending. To which anyone who has any knowledge of how movies work and how a director as powerful as Spielberg works quickly jumped back in to say, it doesn't really matter what the screenwriter wrote. Spielberg as director had the power to end that movie where he wanted to end it. And by ending it where the screenplay ended it, instead of the ending that almost everyone thought it should naturally end at, was a big mistake on his part. In case you're unfamiliar, the movie has a seemingly final scene. After they have successfully voted to pass the 13th Amendment, abolishing slavery in the United States of America, we have what we think is a final scene of Abraham Lincoln preparing to go to the theater. Ford's Theater, where, of course, we all know he was assassinated. We see him pick up his hat and be handed his gloves that he does not want to wear, which he then throws on a table and walks down the hall. The camera then pulls over and focuses on him, his back to the camera, walking down the hall and into history. And then there's a whole nother set of scenes that happen after that. We see a theater in which his young son Tad is attending as someone comes out and announces that the president has been shot. We see Lincoln on his deathbed as they try to attend to his wounds and save him, only to have him die. We then see a pretty schmaltzy shot of the candle burning in a lamp that then becomes Lincoln speaking his second inaugural address. What is so startling to me about this is that Spielberg has a reputation as being one of the canniest directors in movie history. This is a man whose reputation has been based on the fact that he seems to instinctively know where and when to make the cut. He seems to know exactly what to do and how to do it and get the best possible result. So the fact that Spielberg did not see that the natural ending was Lincoln walking away kind of made people's jaws drop to this day. And I literally rewatched it again before doing this to make sure I wasn't wrong. I watched it kind of stunned that anything happens after he shows Lincoln walking down the hall. It took a movie that I felt was very good, excellent even, and kind of lessened it. It just didn't work as well for me because of that ending. And now's the point when I have to end this video. If you did like it, please give it a like and subscribe. It really, truly does help. And it also helps to have people comment about your own favorite endings or your own bad endings that you just can't stand. I would love to hear some of your thoughts in the comments below. And until next time, as always, drive safely.